Welcome back to Law Call on WMBB, and we're here tonight with Stan Peacock, and we're talking about divorce and child custody. Stan, you know, we just left out of the commercial break, talking about the economic impact that our country's facing right now, and what that leads to divorces and how it affects things. But you know, let's just take an easy situation. You got a husband and wife, no children. They kind of get along, but they get along enough to know they don't get along anymore. They get divorced. Walk us through a simple process of how that gets started.
Well,
if there is a simple process.
There is no simple process in the word divorce, okay? Some people look at it as a business partnership, and some people look at it as a totally intimate partnership. There are processes where we go through different adult stages, and obviously if people get to a midlife crisis, which it's been labeled that, some people have midlife crisis a lot earlier than others. But the point is, if they're at a stage where they're not getting along anymore, the best and usually the first option is to try and get some counseling or therapy. The problem comes in from the economic side when somebody loses their job and they don't have the money to feed the kids and or just feed themselves and take care of themselves with their normal expense. And so those economic factors that we were talking about earlier, they still exist. The scenario you're just talking about where someone is married, they have no children, they're ready to call it quits and they're ready to end. There are such activities which can lead to what we would call a simplified divorce. Frankly, children, for example, take up at least 1/3 to sometimes 1/2 of the litigation issues when you have children involved in a divorce situation. If there are no children, then about 1/3 of my job is not necessary. And hopefully it turns to how do we divide up our assets, how do we divide up our debts, and how do we do that equitably. By the way, the word equitable does not necessarily mean equal. And that's the balancing act that we end up in a divorce court. And sometimes when the two parties cannot agree and behave like adults to settle it equitably, it will end up in some form of mediation ordered by a judge. And there are some judges who are more direct about that than others. They'll order you to mediation, give you a 60-day time period or a 30-day time period to schedule it. If the parties don't agree or to schedule a mediation during that time, the judge has other points of view to take, but he can also order temporary orders to apply to both spouses at the same time, and that usually moves the shall we say, the spousal partnership closer to settling a solution.
So Stan, let me jump in right there for a second.
Yes, sir.
We're talking about, you said a buzzword, mediation. Mediation is used all over the legal field now. But before we get to mediation and what that actually means, how long, if we have an uncontested divorce, okay, so two people just agree that they cannot agree to get along anymore.
Right.
What is the length of time with the current backlog? Because our courts are still inundated with hurricane cases. But what is the current backlog now if someone had an uncontested divorce? How long would that take for someone?
It depends, and it depends on who your judge is, and it depends on how quickly that judge can schedule it.
Give us a rough, just an estimate.
I can tell you. I can give you statistics. Okay. The shortest divorce I've ever handled involved a couple that were shortly married for a brief period of time, no kids. That particular couple, both of them were very well educated. They knew their financial situation. They presented, or the spouse that I represented, presented me with paperwork that said, both my wife and I have come up with this. This is what we want to do.
Okay. And
they had it in writing in black and white, and they had it all lined up just like I, as a lawyer, would do a lineup sheet on financials. And they were divorced in about 45 days.
Really?
And
that might be a record.
That is a record.
Unless you're Tiger Woods.
No, that is a record.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with that. I'm telling you, because everybody agreed, that's the shortest one that I've ever had. But that is very rare. Okay.
So, but we also know that the divorces don't always can be done in 45 days, and some of those are taking months and years and many years to complete.
Sure.
Now, that's why mediation is so important, because the courts have recognized that there's a backlog and there's an easier way of doing this, because there's a lot of stuff that individuals don't realize, that once you have a union, The Florida statutes kind of give you a guide, a playbook, I guess, the guidelines. Florida statutes tell you how that union can and will and shall be broken and who
Absolutely.
gets what. So, when you have a little playbook there already, and now you're just fighting over some, was this a premarital asset, or, who gets grandma's china cabinet? I want the football that was signed by whomever. Then you get into what's called mediation, right? When you're trying to get this figured out, because judges really don't want to be sitting there listening to who gets the tea set and who gets the silverware set. So mediation is a wonderful process. We use it all the time in the personal injury world because it allows claimants to still be in control of their case. They can still be active, I should say, because once you file a lawsuit, your control of that case is slowly eroding and slipping away as you progress towards what's called a trial. Because when you get to a trial, guess what happens? A jury makes that decision, or a judge makes that decision. So when we're talking about mediation in the family law, I'm sure it's the same way. Stay in control while you can until a judge or a jury, or not really be a jury, but a judge has to hear that.